Hello, good afternoon. This is 228 special board meeting. This is at 5 o'clock now. So the agenda item first, flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our first item is board agenda approval. This will be again a roll call vote. And Aaron, can you help us out?
Trustee,
Okay, first, can we have a motion for, before for the,
move.
okay, thanks, fellas. And the second,
I'll second.
thanks, Jerry. And Aaron can help.
Trustee Lou,
Aye.
trustee Cunningham. Aye. Trustee Vogel.
Aye.
Trustee Leong, absent. Trustee Madhatel.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, the next one is, since this is a special board meeting, there is no public comments, only for the items in the agenda, only we have public comments, okay? The next item is the communications. Do we have anybody from the employee organization, Aaron?
Yes, we do. We have Kate Lee from CEA.
Okay,
Kate, go ahead. Kate, you should be able to unmute yourself.
hey, Kate, yours.
I apologize. Can I also have my video on?
Go ahead, Kate.
Okay, great. Hi. So I'm here tonight in place of Kai since
We
he's
can't
at
hear you still though.
I'm unmuted on
One
my.
second, hold on. Can't hear you
Yes,
in the
that's
room.
unmuted.
There we go. Go ahead, Kate.
Okay. So
Thanks, Kate.
I'm here to speak for Kai since he's in a meeting tonight with our site representatives that we hold at the end of each month. And I'd like to say good evening to our board, our executive cabinet, to all our fellow CEA teachers and members, all of our dedicated staff at the district, as well as our parent and student community. I'd like to speak tonight about our meeting, the board meeting that you last held. I was listening in as a member and as a teacher, and you heard from many teachers and CEA members through comments at the board meeting, as well as through emails. And many of them were speaking to the importance of a substantial salary raise for our members to keep our district stable and to keep our teachers here and to bring new ones in. I'm representing both our CEA as well as I lead our bargaining team. And I'm a teacher here at our district, fourth grade teacher, and I was a parent for many years. All three of my children went through the school district and was a very active and involved parent as well. And I was thinking, so when I listened to comments and when I listened to the board, I think as a teacher, I think as a lead for our bargaining team, and I think also as a parent in our community, and I was a homeowner and lived in our community as well. And so it's really important to understand how the consistency of our teachers and being able to count on our teachers, being able to stay in our district and have our children as parents is important, because as the teachers were talking about that need for consistency on a site basis, as well as for our students and for their own lives, and as professionals, as teachers, to reach all of our students' needs. I kept thinking about what a priority that is for parents, because parents, when we started to decide whether we could do distance, parents had to decide to stay in distance learning during COVID, and schools were closed, or go to a hybrid option. And their first, once they were sure that both were safe options for under COVID, their first response was, I want to have my same teacher. I don't want my child to have to go to a different teacher. Because that consistency, that parents understand the importance of that consistency. So it's really, it's beyond just numbers and looking at it in that perspective. It's also about the human qualities that we bring as teachers to our district, and that consistency that parents want. And also, when you look at it in terms of finances for our district, every time that we lose teachers to other districts, we have investment of professional development, of consistency at the site, of teachers and grade levels working really well together. So that's another loss that we have, as well as the human aspect of it, as well as the effect that it has on our families and our district. So I want to assure you, we've started working at the table together. We had two great board financial budget presentations, one from our Chris Jew today and one from our CTA member, and Stacy and Kai joined us, and it was a really good chance for us to sit down and look at the budget together and get clarity on that, and that we're going to continue working together to find a way to address what Stacy has been talking about over the past year or so, that commitment, and we believe in that commitment that you guys have brought to us, saying that you want a substantial raise and salary increase because you understand the importance of it for us as teachers and for us as a district and for our community. So we're going to continue to work collaboratively together on that. And I think we'll make sure that we have this genuine interest, and we're going to continue it to make our district and our, which is really our home away from home. It's our extended family, that it continues to be stable and successful and excellent as we move forward. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Kate. Erin, do you have anybody else?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So as in the beginning of the meeting, as I said, that we will not have any public comments for the items which is not in the agenda. But if any of these agenda items from the public comment, if you have any, please fill in the comment cards, and once we start the item, and if you feel anything after that, it will not be called. Okay, thank you. We have two discussion items. Again, the main part of today's meeting is the second interim financial report.
Right. So thank you. And our reason for calling the special board meeting is just timelines and when we do need to do the approval of our second interim, and really wanting to have that opportunity to share with you some of the changes that have come in from the first interim, and have this opportunity tonight to discuss it before we bring it back in March to meet our deadline for the second interim approval. So Chris is going to go through any of the changes that have happened since since December when we presented the first interim, and incorporate some of the information we've learned from the governor's budget as well. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you. Good evening. So as Stacy mentioned, tonight for information purposes, we'll be sharing with you updates to the current year budget. We'll be bringing this back to you for consideration and action at our next meeting in March. So tonight is really kind of a first look at where we are in the year in terms of our first interim budget. So let me first thank a couple people here. Actually, she's not here in the room, but I know Tumai Vong, our Director of Fiscal Services, is online as well. I want to thank her and the staff for, again, their hard work and their diligence in getting this together in time for our meeting tonight. But a shout out to them. So as I started off, we're at that point in time where we're going to update you in terms of where we are budgetarily. The expenditures that are reflected in the budget are reflective as of the end of January. And it reflects all of the budgetary changes as well as of January. We'll be coming back to you in the next couple months as we build out the budget for the 22-23 school year. And so we'll have additional information for you in regards to what budget changes are. But like, as I mentioned in the past, these opportunities are for staff to update you, the board, as far as any changes with any parts of the budget. And that could very well be the various budget assumptions, and we'll talk about various assumptions as well. Next slide. So again, just to start us off, is that when I talk about the budget, it's not just talking about a one-year budget. We're actually talking about a multi-year budget. And so our district looks at a 5-year projected budget. So every one of those years, there are different sets of assumptions that we continue to look at and continue to update as time goes on. And so we've updated those budget assumptions back in December when we came to you with the first interim budget. We updated you with updated assumptions for the coming year right after the governor came out with his January budget proposal. We're updating you tonight with what known assumptions that we have at this time, and then the May revise. The governor will come out in May with his May revision to the budget, and I suspect at that time there'll be other changes with the budgetary assumptions. So between now and June, as you know, we'll bring to you in June a budget for consideration and adoption, and at that point in time, that budget will be based on sets of assumptions up until that point. Next slide. So just to highlight some of the changes since December. Next slide. Just some of the key areas, some of the changes on the revenue side. There were some revenue adjustments in the area of the state lottery funds. We did get some additional funds of about $324,000 of additional funding related to the Universal Kindergarten Implementation Plan. I believe you've gotten some reports from staff in terms of as we are planning to implement Universal TK. There's some additional funding that the governor put into this year's budget. So for us, it's about $324,000 that we've added to the budget since I last presented to you. A little bit of adjustment in the area of property taxes, and I think the largest adjustment revenue-wise since we presented to you in first interim were the various PTO grants and school donations. And so our practice is usually to budget the dollars once the dollars are received by the schools. And so since January, we received about almost $1.1 million of additional revenue this year, all tied to the different schools in terms of donations that they've received or their various PTO grants. And so that's most of the changes to the budget as far as the revenues go. On the expenditure side, various changes. As you recall, back in December, I mentioned to you one of the larger changes with the budget were to account for current positions at that time that were not filled as of then. So we still continue to have some positions that we haven't been successful in filling. And so as those positions continue to be unfilled the rest of the year, we'll continue to recoup those savings or account for those savings. So since December, we've accounted for additional savings in the classified salaries, again, just due to classified positions that we've been unsuccessful in filling. Related to those vacant positions, there were some savings as well in the benefits. We did have a change in some of the benefits around the STRS. We had a different calculated number in one of our spreadsheets. So our STRS calculation back in January wasn't exactly the correct numbers, and so we've made those corrections since then. And so those are some of the other changes. And then, as I mentioned, the largest portions of the changes since first interim were the funds that we received from the parents through the parent donations and the school grants. Next slide. So those were the major changes with the current year budget. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when I talk about budget, it's looking at the multi-year budget. And so one of the major changes in our multi-year budget assumptions is around the property taxes. And there's a couple slides in that we'll talk a little bit more about property taxes, but for this one slide, I just wanted to highlight that we made a budgetary assumption change with what we are projecting the growth of the secured property taxes in the out year. The prior assumption with first interim, we were projecting that those secured property taxes would be growing at a rate of about 4%. It is conservative, but since then the state, the county assessor's office had recalculated their projection, and so they're currently projecting a growth of about 5.01%. So we factored that into our multi-year. So those are the major changes with the assumptions. We go to the next slide. I don't know if we can blow it up for anyone, but this is the multi-year projection. Everyone's kind of familiar with it. I just do want to call out a couple of things. In the 23-24 school year, we have discussed that the multi-year projection here presumes that the parcel tax sunsets. And so there is a reduction of about $8.4 million of local revenue starting the 23-24 school year. The rest of the multi-year budget presumes that the positions and the programs that are being funded by the parcel tax are still in the budget. So all those programs are in the bottom line. And then probably the other key point is since you've heard from our CEA represent that we're at the table right now as far as negotiations go. Our current budget, from what you're looking at right now, assumes right now no changes with the salary schedule. So as we're sitting at the table, and for you at the board, I want to share with the community that our budget here doesn't reflect any salary increases at this point in time. Should we do negotiate a salary increase, as an example, if we were to give all of our employees a 1% equivalent on the salary schedule, it's about an additional $1.4 million of additional expenses to this budget. I don't know, Stacy, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, and I think to keep in mind there, it's a 1.4 million, and then that's going to be compounded over each of the years. So if we were to give a multi-year salary increase, we would need to include that in. So, I think really stressing that none of these outlying 5 years and our current year does not have any salary built into it, a salary increase for any of the employees.
But does it have step in class built in?
It does have
Yes.
step in class incorporated into it. Yes.
All right, next slide. So, we've been talking about property taxes, and I wanted to maybe use this opportunity to continue talking about the property taxes and then entertain any questions that the board has. But the next couple slides are just some graphs and some data. So let's start with the first slide. So the first slide here is talking about secured property taxes. As you remember me talking about, we have 4 different buckets of property taxes that we'll be now monitoring and looking at. The first one, which is the largest portion, is the secured property taxes. Maybe the best way to describe what this represents, it represents the taxes for those who own a property, who own a house in our district. We each get a property tax bill each year, and that property tax bill reflects the secured property taxes for this purpose of tonight. And so I'm showing on this graph here, basically the extent to which the value of our homes, the value of the secured property continues to grow year after year. It grows at a certain rate each year. But when you look at the historical information, and now when you start looking at what we're projecting, the projections are going to depend upon a couple of other things. But historically speaking, I mean, our property properties have continued to grow each year. For purposes of projecting, we're basing our projected property taxes based on what the tax assessor is estimating as far as the assessed value of all the properties. And obviously the tax assessor's office gives us their current projection for the current year, but beyond the current year, they don't give us any kind of a projection. So what we are doing to project out those future years and the assessed value is based on some formulas that I'll share with you on the next slide. So on the next slide, talks a little bit more about what we do and how we calculate the future assessed values. And so we are basing the assessed value growth based on a kind of a 4-year average of the amount of assessed value per $100,000 of assessed value. Let me stop and making sure that I've not lost anybody yet. And I apologize. It's a lot of new terminology here.
Yeah, go, please. Yeah, I think.
Just to confirm, so it's a rolling window of the. So it's a rolling window of the last 4 years, essentially, is what you're doing. Is that what it
Yes,
is?
yes,
Average. So next year you'll take, the 4 most recent years.
correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a
Yeah,
couple
go ahead.
prior slides, but I don't want to jump
No,
out.
I think it's okay. I think since we stopped it, I think the main focus today is this. So
So Chris, back on slide 5, when you were referencing the increase from parent orgs, I just want to make sure that we clarify that's restricted funds that were already earmarked for specific programs and positions funded by those parent organizations, not additional contributions to the general fund in an unrestricted manner.
Yes.
And then, sorry, on slide 8, Phyllis asked about, so the multi-year. Phyllis asked about if step and column was included. Are other known increases already built in, STRS and PERS increases?
Yeah, I thank you for asking the question again. So related to the step and column changes in the multi-year, there are other assumptions in there. The projected increases or changes, projected rate changes with both the PERS and the STRS, which were the pension costs. And in addition, there are some other various changes, budgetary assumptions like health benefit increases. So those are the underlying factors that affect payroll and affect the multi-year projecting of salary and benefits.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. And then Stacy mentioned and you also, the 1.4 million, that's a per percent, right?
What the equivalent of a 1%
1%.
salary.
And that's across all classes, not
Yeah,
just.
that represents, that
stated.
is representative of all the employment organizations.
Right, okay, so then to follow up on what Stacy was saying, if it's, I don't want to throw out a number because we're in negotiations right now. Whatever the number is in year 1, which is 2021, 22 right now, compounds again into the following year and into the following year. But in terms of our multi-year, I need to be looking at the next set of 3 years going forward, not including this current school year, if I'm thinking about qualifying a budget.
Yes, for the point of providing a positive budget, the county is going to look at the next year +2. And so it's really
We're already in year 2 of that compounding in terms of our multi-year moving forward.
yes, that's another way to saying it. Yes.
Thank you.
thanks. Anything, Philip, you have?
No, I have nothing. Thank you.
So then I will also ask a question then here on the multi-year thing. So I see the certificated salaries significantly going down from the next year onwards. Is it because the anticipation of the shrinking or anything, or why it is like an 85 to 80 and 80, then 79 and 79. So it unlike other categories, it's going down significantly.
Mhm. So the answer to your question is the fact that with certificated employees, the salaries are showing to decline because it's reflecting the district's projected decline of enrollment. As we shed about 30 some odd kids for each 30 kids, it's the equivalent of one less certificated position. So we've projected the decline of enrollment to the point of reducing the amount of certificated FTEs, and that reduction in certificated FTEs is reflective in the reduction of these costs, the certificated salary costs in the budget.
Okay. How realistic these things are? Because I'm a little worried is like, since our estimated ending fund is increasing significantly, right, fund side, and we are showing a reduction here, means like how closely it can, right? So will it become a wrongly projected numbers?
Sure. So with our certificated, we do use the ratios that are outlined in the contract. And so when we project out, we are looking at student enrollment. We also realize that there are some anomalies when we talk about class sizes. The kids don't always fit in those perfect packages of 24 and 33. So we do build in that buffer as well, realizing that we may have some additional staffing, but we have been very accurate on our projections as far as the reductions in the teachers. I know the question that I think was implied but wasn't asked, why do we see the difference in the certificated staff? And we are building in based on declining enrollment and our staffing ratios that are outlined in the contract. We don't have those same ratios built into classified staffing. And so that's why you're not seeing those outlying years with the projections of what our decline of enrollment will have impact on the classified. So we do look at that each year. We haven't gotten to a point where we've looked at aligning the number of students declining as to what does that significantly mean for classified staff. And I think an easier way to show an example on a school site has a secretary, has a SITS, has a library media. So if that school loses 30 to 40 students, it doesn't necessarily mean that one of those positions is being reduced or lost. And so it is looked at a little bit differently. So that's not necessarily built into the outlying years as to what those classified reductions will be.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up to what you
Yes,
just
yes.
asked? I just want to make sure we clarify that the drop in enrollment on our funded ADA is different than our actual enrollment. And can you just touch on the hold harmless between years 2021, or sorry, 21, 22 and 22, 23, just so that we're super clear for the community?
Sure, thank you. So to answer the question from Board Member Cunningham, for purposes of funding this year for the 21-22 school year, although we're still being funded based on enrollment or LCFF funding, our funding is based on the average daily attendance of the amount of students that we have. Now, because of the provisions with the pandemic and the impact to school districts, the governor included in this year's budget a hold harmless provision that allows school districts for funding purposes to fund this year, not based on this year's average daily attendance, but actually the average daily attendance that the district generated back in the 1920 school year.
2020.
Yeah.
No, the 1920 school year,
Oh,
2 years
19.
ago.
19 and 20. Kind of.
2019, 2020. So imagine 2 years ago, based on the number of students that we had enrolled in the district at that point in time, we are being funded this year based on that level of students. But as you know, since then, our enrollment has declined. Should we have been funded should we have been funded without this hold harmless agreement? We would be funded this year at a much lower level in line with the current numbers of students that we have this year. So we are the benefactor all districts are benefiting from this hold harmless provision. But if without it, we would be, we would be funded at a much lower level.
I think the other thing while we're back on this slide is to really stress is near the bottom, the green, the estimated ending fund balance. I know that there's been a lot of conversation when you're looking at these numbers, and in our 21-22, you're seeing a 45 million all the way up to 2025 to 2026. It rises up to 72 million. And really to consider what's comprised when we say this ending fund balance. It does include our reserves. It does include our restricted dollars, as well as some of our unrestricted dollars. And so it isn't this available money that is sitting out there that we have to spend. It also is that area where when we do negotiate for our salary increases, that's where those salary increases come out of, is this ending fund balance. And so, while right now on paper, we're still in the process of negotiating, we're seeing the 72 million, but in the 5 years out, but it's really important to remember that is not all money that we can spend on general fund, or again, we have restrictions on it. We have our board reserve, we have our state reserve. That's all part of that number as well. So I think it's important to give that reminder as well.
Stacey, could you clarify just in a few sentences the difference between restricted and unrestricted? Because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding sometimes around what those are.
Sure. So with Chris,
I can, or you can.
So with our restricted money, most of those are what we call one-time money. And I know that's very confusing for some when we say one-time money, and yet you're seeing that money there, but they really come to us one time. Once they're spent, they're gone. We may not have elected to spend all of them in one particular year. We may be carrying them over. So they still have that restriction. They're only there for one time. Once they're spent, they're spent. The other part of restrictions are a lot of the money that we're getting, the donations, the grant money from the schools. Those are all, they have designated or specific uses that we can have. We also receive some of the categorical money that has specific uses. They're not able to be used for anything that we want to spend on. There are very specific uses for them. So they're all lumped together into that restricted category.
Can I ask one more, Satish, on this one?
Yes, please.
Sorry. Can we also clarify that I shouldn't say no district, because I'm sure somewhere someone has done it, but almost no district would flow from one year into the next with a zero balance in there, because you need your reserves, you need your working capital for the following years, you need your restricted funds. All of those still need to show in that end balance. So there's always going to be a number there.
Yeah, I think to your point is that for a district to meet the fiscal solvency requirements, they must show at the end of the day that they have a reserve balance representative of the size of their budget. Obviously, if we had a negative number, it would mean that we would be insolvent. And so we wouldn't, well, there'd be a lot would have to happen before you got to that point.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Jerry, anything you want? I think
yeah.
let's conclude. Let's finish these questions. Is it okay? Like we will. I think we anyway we will be asking otherwise more questions later.
Sure, I'll keep
Okay.
it to this point. So just to make sure, this 5.01, this is basically the number from the county for our area. It's not some county average,
No.
but specifically, great. And then this heuristic of using a 4-year rolling window to project, is this commonly what other basic aid districts in our county does? Or if you could share a bit about what you know about practices.
I don't know what other basic aid districts do. I'm looking at it mainly based on the historical data that we have, but I think it also too is to reflect the I say the volatility or I would say volatility. I would probably say that because the property taxes can vary quite a bit from one year to the next, that we do need to have a metric here to be able to conservatively project out what the growth is. I don't think anyone hopefully doesn't think that we're not assuming that our property values are declining at all, but the amount of growth from one year to the next is dependent upon several factors. One, the amount of growth, and then also the unknown factor in terms of how many pieces of property get reassessed value-wise as ownership changes, or how many new properties get built. All of those factors compound how much the assessed value grows from one year to the next.
Right. Okay. No, I think I was just wanting to understand a bit of the logic behind this. And I understand certainly the difficulty. The assessor doesn't give you more than a year. I can imagine, is there some correlation of this with, say, other, there are predictions out there. But anyway, this is fine. I just wanted to know where this came from. And then a little bit back when you were talking about the delta between the first interim and here, right? You talked about the revenue changes, and that's about 1.2 million if I were to add up your 4 boxes. For the expenditure changes, I was wondering if you could comment on what's the delta there. You didn't have numbers on the boxes, so I wasn't able to add it up myself. I was just wondering if you had that number off the top of your head. Right here, this slide, just order of magnitude. If not, I can get the answer later.
I
It's
have
fine.
it right here.
Oh, okay.
For the expenditures, let's see here. Classified salaries decrease by about 780,000. The benefits, the net change was a increase of about 293,000. Supplies and services increased by about 2.1 million total.
All right, great. All right, thank you. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Jerry. There's anything from? Okay, then I think we'll get going then. We'll come back if anything needed.
I think we have a couple more slides on the
Okay,
property
okay.
tax.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, Chris.
All right. Unsecured. In addition to the secured property taxes that are generated from those homeowners, there are also the businesses and other assets that generate a tax as well. And so these are representative of the unsecured property taxes. And so based on the assessed value of those those values, then generates an amount of unsecured property taxes. And so we use the same methodology on the next slide, the same methodology to calculate what, or to project what the next several years looks like based on in this case, a 2-year average, because there's even more volatility with these the assessed values from one year to the next in this particular area. So these are the two main areas. There are 2 other buckets of property taxes. They're the homeowner's exemption as well as the supplemental taxes. But this last slide here just kind of sums it all up, and let me kind of walk everyone through. It's a new slide, and I want to make sure as we introduce new slides, I explain what it's showing. So first and foremost, this slide is showing what the sum total of each of these buckets for each year and what we're projecting out. When you look at the grand total is reflective in that second to last column. That's really the number that impacts us. When you look at the sum total of all of these different property taxes, this is the benchmark that we are now monitoring in terms of how it impacts our budget. And so I don't know if we can blow up the picture a little bit. There you go. Thank you. So if we scroll down to what's highlighted in yellow, what's highlighted in yellow is what the projections are. And so the current projection as far as increase in property tax revenue for next year, the 22-23 school year, based on these calculations, is estimating that we would see, bless you, an increase of about a little bit more than 5.4% on just the property taxes. And then the projections calculate out for the other years. Again, based on that assumption earlier on that the assessed value grows at a rate of 5.01%. So I just want to make sure people understand that when we talk about the assessed value or the assessed property growth value of 5.01%, that number does not equally transfer over to an increase in total property tax revenues. Because I think that's where I want to make sure people understand is that it's not a one-for-one correlation. That increase in total property taxes at the end of the year could be more or it could be less than that assessed value growth because of various other factors that go into the property tax assumptions. So I'll stop and take any questions you might have about the property taxes before we go further.
Yeah, I think let's go in the same order.
I don't have any things.
Not anything. Okay, then I will ask one question at least on this side. What's the risk around here? Because in a ADA kind of time where we were much more confident, like you get certain revenue, okay, whatever it is. Like now, since we are purely depending on the property tax, and there are a lot of assumptions we are making here, right? This 5.01, it's kind of a guaranteed or because this can have, because I see the unsecured property tax, for example, this is showing variations a lot, right? If you see it like -5, then +2, then again -1, and so on. So there are a lot of uncertainties around there, right? So when you are projecting this out, how, there can have always a question on the accuracy part of it, right? Because we are talking about 2 years from now or 3 years from now, and a lot of assumptions we are making. So is there a risk around this?
Well, nothing's guaranteed. There aren't any guarantees. I think to best answer your question is that with the fluctuations in these, because they're projections, right? These are projections. These aren't actuals. We won't know the actuals until the tax revenues actually come to us. So the fact that these are projections and we talk about budgetary projections is that we continue to review these as frequently as when they become available to us. So I think it's critical for us, especially now since we're moving into this basic aid status, is that we take these opportunities to monitor those and update our budget accordingly, and then obviously share this information with you, our community, as far as those changes goes. Because again, these aren't guaranteed numbers.
These are not guaranteed. Yeah.
I think it also lends to, several previous conversations that we've had when we started talking about the reserve and the need to increase our reserve because of just this reason. So basic aid districts typically will try to maintain a 10% reserve minimally, because it is as that saving reserve in case we go through volatile times and the property taxes suddenly take a dive. We have that money built in to be able to continue to meet our budget obligation. And so, our sole increase of trying to get at least to a 10% reserve is also built in to our multi-year budgets as well.
Can I clarify on that? It's not, how do I want to say this? It's not just about whether or not the property taxes take a dive. Even a level off is dangerous if you're a basic aid district, because you don't get COLA anymore. So your only growth comes from new property tax growth, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay, so do you have any general questions? Then should we go back? Like anything? Okay.
I don't have anything else.
Okay, anything, Lori, you have any?
Sorry, I turned it off. No, I'm good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay.
Satish.
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay, I think I covered most of the things on I was more worried about the accuracy part of it, like because we are projecting a lot and showing some good numbers. Hopefully we'll stay in the good numbers, but do not want to fall out on that, right? Thanks. Then I think let's go for some public comments if any. Then
We have no public comments.
okay. Thank you. And
So our plan will be, we will bring it back at our next board meeting for approval.
yeah, okay. That'll be an action.
It will
thing,
be an
or-
action.
Okay. So let's go to the 5.2 parcel tax and bond.
So tonight, what we wanted to bring at a very high level, we often reference the parcel taxes. We're talking about on multi-year, and it is going to expire in June of 2023. It does bring in that revenue that we do rely on, that we currently fund approximately 77 FTEs and some other sources. And so we wanted to bring back both the parcel tax and the bond and just share some timeframes of possibilities if we were to choose to go out and renew our parcel tax, or if we were to go out and choose a bond, just so that we can start having the mindset of timeframes and have just that general discussion is what are our next steps if we're even going to have a further discussion on it. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. So tonight, just a couple of things. I mean, first couple of slides into the presentation is just some summary, some highlights in terms of just the great work both our parcel tax and our general obligation bond has done for our district. And maybe this is the time where I'd like to thank our community for supporting both the parcel tax and the bond measure, because we've done so much work with both of those, and without the support of our community, we wouldn't be able to continue to carry on those core program areas of the district, as well as keep our facilities up to date as a 21st century learning environment. So those are first and foremost, want to say thank you to the community for that. But as Stacy mentioned, it's really more about talking about, okay, so what are some of the things to be talking about? Because as we slowly come down from these programs, we do want to be aware of what are some of the requirements if we are to entertain the possibility of going out there for possibly an extension. So the first couple slides are just some highlights. I mean, these are some of the highlights we've shared with the community around the parcel tax. These are how the monies are being spent and what particular services that those funds cover. Next slide. Another description of how we're spending the parcel tax revenues. The next two slides, actually, I want to spend a little bit of time just to demonstrate, help demonstrate for our community that we've been such great stewards of the bond funds. So in it, you know, the community passed a $220 million general obligation bond to help us continue to renovate our facilities. But during that point in time when we were issuing those bonds, we did take the opportunity to refinance some of those bonds from the Measure H, as well as some of the older bonds from some of our older obligations. And so we based on these next two slides here, we saved almost about $40 million to the taxpayers as far as interest on all of these various bond refinancings. So I do want to make sure that we remind the community that, you know, we're continuing to be great stewards with those funds, and then as we find opportunities to lower the interest rates on old issued bonds, that we're going to do so to reduce that. So I think that's one of the things I don't think we recognize as often as we should. Really, you know, what we're saving our taxpayers. And so those are the taxpayer savings. Next couple slides after that are just looking at what those timelines look like. So Aaron, maybe the next slide. So right now, based on the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters Office, we have the two upcoming elections, one in August and one in November. To get onto any one of those ballots would require the district to submit a letter, a resolution authorizing the calling for an election. And so those dates depend upon a couple of things. So if we were to look at an August ballot, we would actually have to get something on file as late as end of May, early part of June. For the November election, the next slide, the time frame is to get something on file by mid end of August. so those are the dates that we'd have to be sensitive of if we were considering any of these two upcoming dates. I think that's, oh, and then I think Stacy mentioned, I think we want to begin having some more conversations about the possibilities of either a parcel tax or general obligation bond. But it might be of interest to the board to have staff engage and get some polling done to see how our community feels about either the two as a possibility. So, I don't know, Stacey, you want to add?
Well, and I think that, just as we have that discussion, one, we know when the parcel tax expires, whether we go out for a renewal or not, that needs to be one of our future discussions. Conducting a poll prior to that help us formulate our decision on that? And then with a bond, we had actually brought forward our facility master plan back in 2020, which we know there have been some adjustments, with the closure of 2 schools, we have 2 less schools that were incorporated into that original. We'd want to relook at that plan. And, I think at that time in June of 2020, we brought in different phases. So we'd want to revisit, is that still an approach that we'd want to go to a bond if we choose to go out for a bond? So again, I think just getting that timeline in everyone's mind, that if we're looking at November, we do have some discussion to come up. If we didn't go out for this November for the bond, then the next available time would be the following November of 2024. A parcel tax, as we know, we can put on anytime if it's a special election. It just is a much higher cost than if you go with a general election. So just some of those pieces of information to put into your thoughts so that we could have a discussion at our upcoming board meetings.
Thank you. Any questions, clarification?
Sure, you're looking for a question. I have comments, a few questions.
No,
for
I
both.
think
Just,
it's fine. You can mix it.
either?
both.
Okay. I'll start with a question. Do we have a sense of what the cost of putting a measure on the November election would be, given that it's a general election and so fairly predictable who's on there or what the elections, just from historically, could you share how much?
Yes.
Likely to
So
cost?
historically for that election, for any kind of for any measures for the district, it's in the range of about $400,000.
Okay. All right. And then, so I would imagine prior to polling the community, we would develop a set of, I don't know, the product feature, or so what the benefits of the parcel and the bond would be. The bond presumably would be updating the update of the facility master's plan. For the parcel, would it be these 4 planks that we've used in the past, or what's the current thinking of what will we ask the community about?
So currently with its expiration, and again, I think based on board's direction, if that's how you choose to go, would be a renewal. So it wouldn't be an increase in taxes to the community. It would just be renewing what's currently in place. And so those 4 platforms would still be the focus for the
So we
parcel
use the
tax.
same 4 platforms.
Yes.
Okay. And then how quickly will we be able to, if we were to go forward with a poll, how much work is there in updating the facilities master plan? So we can, or would that even be part of the polling?
I don't necessarily know that update would need to be part of the polling. We have enough information that we could do a general interest of whether the community at this point even supports going out for a bond. We would have a couple different options, whether the amount we could go in different phases. It's been 10 years for us to go out for a general bond, which is quite a length of a time for a school district. Most districts don't wait that long. So we do have a lot of work that needs to be done on our facilities, but we could do it in phases as well so that it isn't, I think the original facility master plan was about a 1 billion and came back with phases of about 500 million. So I think that's more of what we want to reassess and look at with the master plan is what would be the amount that we'd want to go out or recommend going out for.
Got it. Okay. Those are my questions. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I am on. Okay. Can somebody talk a little bit about just a general update of where we are with our current bond, and also maybe touch on state matching? and how you get state matching from bond dollars.
Okay. Where we are with our current bond, we're finishing up the last of our current plan projects. Funding for the last project is coming from both our general obligation bond as well as state funding. We have applied for, actually, we continue to apply for funding from the state to do these types of modernization projects. The funding for modernization from the state comes every 20 years. So every 20 years, we're able to reapply for additional fundings to renovate our existing school property. So we have finished that first cycle. Our last schools that we received funding were for let's see here, Kennedy, CMS, and then I think at the last school. But we've exhausted that. But again, it's on a cycle. So one of the schools that we modernized first back before all this was Eaton. And so I believe there's probably funding for Eaton in the next couple of years.
And maybe more specifically touch on if we don't, if our local community doesn't have a bond in place and we're not spending on that, are we eligible for the full amount of state matching that we would otherwise be?
If I understood your question, I mean, if without the local funding,
Most of the state programs expect that we are paying for a portion of it, and then they are also paying for a portion of it. So
correct,
if we
yes.
don't have funds in place to pay
Yes.
for a portion of it, then we're not eligible for the matching funds from the state.
yes, so
In most
we could apply for the funding, but to access the funding means that you have your funds already set aside, your match to cover that.
Okay, so then as I'm building my questions here, there is a lot of talk right now in the current budget cycle that the state may reach the GAN limit, and one of the most obvious options for the legislature to choose to put extra funds into is infrastructure, and specifically there seems to be a lot of interest around schools infrastructure. So if the state were to increase the amount of matching funds available in the bond program, would we be eligible for that if we don't have a new bond in place?
Well, we would need to have our matching portion. And the only way for us to cover our matching portion would be through our local bond, passing of a bond.
That gets at it. Thank you, Chris.
Any more, Lily?
I'll wait. Let me think. You guys go.
So my question is, you mentioned it would be about $400,000 if we floated an election in November.
A
What would it-
normal November election cycle.
Right. What about the August date? What would our cost be on that?
I don't have that number, but I mean, if it's close to what we were estimating when we last when we last attempted to go out for the bond during the off cycle, I am suspecting it's probably, in that $1 million to $2 million range.
I knew it was significantly more. I just didn't know. Yeah. So with respect to, do we want to do a poll? I do, just putting it out there. I'm not going to bury the lead here, but I think if we're going to do a poll, we should consider using a polling company to do it. And I think it seems like EMC charges us something $15,000-$20,000. Am I close?
I don't know what the
Roughly.
original.
Yeah, I
ranges
think
were.
that's about what they would cost us to do a poll. They've had a lot of experience. They've done a lot of polls for us before. I know people have mixed feelings about polls. We had a lot of discussions in the last around with the parcel tax about whether we wanted to do it or not. But I think it gives us information, and I think it uses people who are experts and they know how to ask the right questions. If we use EMC, they know our district. So I think that would be important information for us to have with respect to both a bond and a parcel tax. Whether or not the community would support it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for this. And I think in the same thing, Chris, like I'm just in line with what fellas asked. This 400K, does it include, is it just for parcel or for bond separate? If at all you're going to have come back, let's say you're going to have two things going in, it's an addition or it's all together, this 400K, if it is going in November, just for our talking.
So with the poll, we could do them for both.
No, I'm talking about the expense perspective.
The cost of the
Cost
election.
of the
itself.
The
election,
cost of the
Yeah,
election.
I don't know if the election, if that elect, I mean, I don't know if by having two ballot measures on there significantly changes that election cost.
We can certainly find that out specific.
So today, are we expecting more discussion on this to get into a decision, or is this just for an information kind of thing? Because
Tonight really is just for information because again, through the budget, we've been mentioning the parcel tax and talking about the parcel tax. I think we've had a couple presentations on our facilities and hearing from our central kitchen. And so we wanted to at least put that out there so that we could begin to have the discussion. And tonight seemed like it fit in well with our budget as we're talking about it. Let's talk about some of those other financial aspects.
I'm definitely for the poll for sure. Like I think last time also I raised that thing. Okay, not that we did not do, or I'm not saying that something we did not do right or anything, but I think if at all we are going to, or if you are going, I think we have to make sure that we are getting much more early information on this. Otherwise, jumping into a bigger things would be much more challenging thing, in my view. The last one question here is that, when we say, okay, I think maybe when we say that, the taxpayer saving, right? What really it means? Like, are you getting additional 40 million for using in our total cost, like, or our total revenue? Are we having additional 40 million to do on the facility?
No, that's a great question. The fact that we have saved our taxpayers, $40 million doesn't mean that we have $40 million more to spend.
Yeah.
It's reducing the tax rate. It's reducing how much our community is paying in terms of interest on those principal balances. So it doesn't translate to give us more funding to do more projects. It's just savings directly from you as a taxpayer.
Thanks for the clarification.
And I think our bond and tax people have been, and our finance department have been really diligent about paying attention to the interest rates and all that, so that when it's to our advantage to refinance the bonds or whatever we do with parcel taxes, I think we've done that. And I think we've been, as Chris said, good stewards of the public funds by doing that whenever we could.
Should we go for one more?
Sure. Just comment-wise, I certainly also support going forward with a poll. I think it would be irresponsible of us to make decisions on something like this without any data. I also support what Phyllis said about retaining a professional to do this rather than survey monkey ourselves. Because anyway, for all the reasons we can talk about later, I guess I would sort of ask, right, is to we're going to get these results back and we have to make a decision on sort of whether or not we do it, but also the kind of benefits we want to provide to the community. And so I'm not, for instance, for the parcel tax, there are 4 different planks here. I know asking about all 4 might make for a long survey. So I'm not here to say ask for 4 or 3 or whatever, but to the extent that we can get information on where there's traction, I guess, with the community, what they like to see. And then if there's any way to also get whatever demographic data, that would be helpful also. And again, I know it's going to be rough with big error bars, but and I think, when I think about sort of the with measure O, I think that was a more complex one because there was more numbers and all that. This one for the parcel, we're really just asking for renewal. So that's a very fixed amount. We're not playing with different things here. And then for the bond, I presume that we'll test different bond amounts. So we'll certainly leave it to staff to determine what those good steps would be. So, but generally, I support what Satishan and Phyllis have said. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jen.
And I'll chime in and say, I am in favor of trying to go back to polling again. I know we had the error bars, to Jerry's point, really didn't do us a big service, with our 2020 attempt. And so we tried some different data sets for the following one and didn't really have a different result than what the polling error bars were originally. So I would be in favor of going back to getting some polling. I guess I also have a request. As you guys look at bringing forward a contract, a couple of things. Number one, I think Phyllis and I heard a lot last time from the pollsters about, sort of the traditional ways some of these companies do things. Whether or not it's EMC or not, I think we need to recognize that this community has really moved away from phone polling, and we need to make sure whoever we hire has a very robust method for online surveying. I think the other request I would have is, I think if we're going to go back to polling, we need to make sure that we are bringing forward a contract that actually is going to get us the information that helps us make decisions. And I think it's actually going to be probably a larger poll that we're going to need to do, and maybe some multi-sampling we're going to need to do, because Jerry mentioned the 4 planks and a simple renewal, and I don't know that that's necessarily the only thing the community has an interest in. We heard a lot last time about some other methods of parcel taxes and interest in square foot parcel, which we know the high school district has a lot of data around, but we don't have data of our own. So if we're going to go out for polling and we're going to ask the questions of our community to try and help us make an informed decision, I think we actually may need to pull more than just the simplest question of a renewal. Just my opinion. And I think that's it, other than wanting to pull both the bond and the parcel, what I'm seeing here. So sorry, I know that's a lot.
So if I'm kind of recapitulating, staff can bring back at the next board meeting or sometime in March, we can bring back some proposals, thoughts on different polling companies, polling sources that we could use, and present a proposal for that and start that process. If that's agreeable to everyone.
And then the scope of what they can pull.
Yes.
Thank you.
And their methodology.
Yes.
Yeah.
So by when, okay, that is the agenda or whatever you're talking now is specific to the poll, or are you going to talk a little bit more on the complete,
So when we
proposal,
bring
or,
back the proposal, we that would also give us an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the parcel tax and the bond, give some of those parameters that we want to go out with on the poll. I do think we probably need some clarification as to the specificity of what we want to ask for the community. I think we've gotten some of our notes here, but maybe get a little bit more defined in that as well. And I do believe we have public comments on this.
yeah, but anything anymore from our, okay. So let's go for the public comment then.
Sure. Matthew Thomas and Valentin Rybov, if you could please raise your hands. Valentin, go ahead.
Hello,
Hey, we can hear you.
fantastic. And I got the whole 3 minutes, so that's great. I will blaze through because I'm babysitting my little one. And she's trying to run away. So first of all, the district has plenty of funds. That's even looking at your own presentations, it has plenty of funds. It is slated to become a basic aid in 2022-23. It also keeps losing students at the accelerated rate, probably because it was closed for longest and few other pitfalls. So given that you're getting an ever increasing property tax, sorry about that, why in the world, and given the failures of Measure O and Measure A, why in the world would you try for another parcel tax? It's insane. It's asinine and consequential. Why would you even try doing this? And again, you're put in two different timelines, 2 months apart, knowing full well that a special election will cost you 1 million because there won't be any other measures to share the cost with. So why would you try to spend 1 million more on failing something that will fail on a general election day? And I mean, that's beside the point of why even try to do something that will, will fail. So Chris Jew, that is, asked how the community feels about the parcel tax. I think Measure O and Measure A gave you as clear of an indication about the community, how the community feels as any. Both failed. Why do you think that Measure something in 2022 has even a remote chance of passing? Why do you need to hire a contractor to tell you that it will fail? And finally, since you are talking about the parcel tax, why are you pushing to renew the same old parcel tax and not even trying for square footage? Thank you.
Thanks, Val.
Matthew Thomas, if you could please raise your hand. I don't see Matthew present.
Okay, that's it, right?
Correct.
Okay, then I think public comments are over on this. I think let's go to the next one, action 6.1.
So for this one, we are bringing back the revised resolution that was brought back at the last meeting. Mike, you want to
Sure.
give a quick overview?
Thank you. Yes, these reductions are a combination of site reductions based on PTA funding decisions as well as by reductions due to declining enrollment. Each year, the school sites meet with the parent organizations to develop the following year's budget and allocations towards support staff. This is an annual process, and the resolution is required to be brought to the board prior to the March 15th. Layoff affected staff meet with HR and union representatives to determine bumping rights as well as to locate possible vacant positions they may be qualified to move into for the 2022-23 school year. So this resolution is the corrected resolution that you folks had asked me to bring. And here it is.
Okay. Mike, then I think we had a discussion last time, but do you want to go one more time with any questions?
I'd like to, should we someone make a motion before?
Oh, yeah, I think, yeah, so, yeah, that's
It's an
good,
action
yeah.
item.
So let's make a motion then under, yeah. Since you're only
I'll
three of
make
you.
the motion.
Okay, thanks for listening. One of
I'll
you.
go ahead and second it.
Okay, thanks, Jerry.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a motion on the table. Let's discuss that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we had gotten an email from SITS basically asking about sort of their hours being cut. So I wanted to maybe just double click on that item here. That we show 2.4, which is what we had last time. And I guess some of this is because of the site reduction. The rest of the hours here for the FTE, is it due to lack of parent donations, or is it any of it attributed to actual district cuts?
Okay, so there are 22 people that are involved in this right now. 16 of them are due to the school closures.
Okay.
And then 6 are due to parent funding from the sites.
Okay, and those are the only two sources. There are no district cuts otherwise.
There are
other
no
than
district
site
cuts.
reduction and parent approved donations.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anything on it?
I don't have anything to-
Yeah, so I have a particular interest in the SITs and the library media clerks. So I'm going to make the assumption that the SITs are reduced because 2 of them are the schools that are closing, and the other 0.4 is because of a reduction in site funds. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And then if we're closing 2 schools, I don't understand the 1.75 for the library media clerk. Are we not reducing the both of those schools that are closing?
So I think to clarify, the SITs and the library media clerk, there are actually three individuals that are being affected, the 3 sites that are actually closing. So that doesn't entail Meyerholtz, Muir, and Regnart.
There's
Muir is not really closing. Muir is.
But due to the contractual and their rights, bumping rights, they are notified because it is a new site for them. And so to follow the contract language,
got it.
they are provided the
Okay.
layoff notice as
All
well.
right, that's it. Thank you, Satish.
So thanks for it. And I think, Mike, did you say that these people have a chance to reapply or something like that? It's already been. what is
Yeah,
the
now,
process?
most of these folks will have an opportunity to land in a position. If all the bumping falls the way it can, the worst possible scenario would be four people would be, and they're the least senior, the most recently hired.
Okay. Thank you. That's it. So any more questions or comments or discussion? So then should we go for a roll call vote on this?
We do have 2 public comments.
Oh, okay. Yes, please. Sorry.
Mark Lowndes and Marissa Kakamarski, if you could please raise your hands.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, Mark.
Good evening. Just a clarification about the part of the closures. To Phyllis's comments, those were not 2 full-time positions. You might want to ask about that. But of course, cutting worker hours goes along with closing schools. However, the school site instructional technology specialist positions being cut in this resolution go beyond that. That parent organizations are propping up district payroll is a situation that pleases no one. But the fact that they do shows that there's a need for those hours. When a TK teacher with no aid cannot log into her computer, she can't just tell the kids to wait while she spends 15 minutes on the phone with help desk. She needs help immediately. The district should be paying for the worker hours needed at all campuses. This reduction can be paid for with only a fraction of the SITS cuts from the closing schools. I ask the board to table this resolution and send it back to staff for changes that reflect the actual needs of our teachers and students by restoring all of the cuts to SITS hours that are not caused by school closures. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Marissa. Go ahead,
Good
Marissa.
Hi there, this is Marisa. I want to expand on what Mark brought up. Fact of the matter is just about a decade ago, when the district first started paying for the SITs, we weren't even called that yet. We had about 20 to 25% of the devices and online systems that we have now. And those numbers were initially set, the hours were set based on student population. But these days, since technology is so seamlessly woven into the fabric of the classroom, it seems like it's a detriment to the student if you don't have somebody on campus that can help them throughout the school day. If you don't have somebody on site for the duration of the school day, you're going to have students, I'm afraid, that are going to be hindered by a technical issue the teacher can't handle. And then by chance, it's the end of the day and the SITS isn't there because he wasn't paid to be there. So it seems like with all the investment that we have put into technology in the last decade, it seems a shame to underfund the support and keep our students interacting with the curriculum resources that we intended for them to use. So I really want you to look at the fact that the closing of the schools really is just about a 1.5 FTE. You can fund the rest of the hours that the PTOs are defunding and keep those SITs at the hours they're at now. And it seems like it's a better opportunity for our students to remain in good instructional environments. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Are there any more comments or?
No, there are not.
That's it, okay. Okay, just I wondered before going, any more comments or should we be voting or you? after, yeah.
Sorry, actually, what I think my Siri or something is talking. I don't know how to turn off these Apple. I guess someone down at Apple's hopefully not listening to all. I guess it's okay to. I wanted to. Sorry.
Yeah, that's-
this distraction there. I wanted to maybe talk a bit about the points that the speakers brought up, and not this particular one, but I think the general. Because I'm sure the decision points they brought up are ones that the districts looked at, and I was wondering if you share a bit of the thinking behind that of sort of which ones do we choose to fund, which ones we leave for the parent organizations, and want to hear a bit about sort of maybe not even in the here and the now, but what would we like for things to be and all that. I don't know if Michael or Stacy or just
Well, I know it's like anything else. If the need arises and we don't have those folks, we would always go back and circle around and revisit adding more hours or returning hours that were taken from folks. It's just at this point, it's based on, student enrollment and those kind of things. So like I said, if we had to go back and circle the wagons and reevaluate, we've done that several times before.
And I think I would just add to that, at each of the sites, there are district funded set number of hours for our library media and our SITs. And so as a school site, if they determined that they wanted to add additional hours, that's where the parent funding comes in. So district does fund the positions initially on each of the sites and then those additional hours. And so what we found is across the district, we do have sites that parent funding more hours than others. Some have no parent funds. And so they just use the district established number of hours. I think one of the big emphasis, as we've been talking over this last year, when we really were looking at consolidating, closing schools, one of those primary purposes is that we as a district can provide those supports, those services that we feel are necessary for every campus. And so that is one of the results of doing the school consolidation. As we look at our 23 remaining schools, we'll be bringing back, this is what we want to be able to offer to every student at every site, that it's not dependent on a parent organization so that one school gets one school gets less. And so I think this is all part of that process as we're moving forward and really establishing what every school will be able to offer to every student, no matter which school a parent chooses them to go to. So we're in that process. We are going to be bringing back, I believe it's at our board advance, some additional information about our SITs, our arts program, our music program, and our library media, and how we can better support the schools.
Great, thank you. No more
Thanks,
questions.
Anything, Laurie?
No, I think you actually just hit on it. I know I had requested that agenda item, so yay.
That's good.
Thank you for bringing it back.
So I would just like to say to the superintendent and the staff that I think the point that was made by the speaker about the additional devices that we have in schools for kids to use and the amount of support that needs. So I think as you look at redeploying resources into the schools to serve all kids, the SITs is something you should take a good hard look at, so that our kids and teachers really do get the support they need for all those additional devices. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Phyllis. And I want to echo the same thing, right? So I think that's very important, especially the amount of or what kind of service or what kind of support we were getting during the true, last 2 years kind of, and the number of devices went up. And I'm sure like still people will be using those, especially from the teaching perspective. So I think this is very critical, and let's, give that as a priority for sure.
I think the other piece, just as that reminder of what we're feeling the effects of, is this is that first year with the new legislation that we're required to notify classified staff by that March 15th. So it really has pushed up our deadlines. Typically, we wouldn't be asking our parent organizations what they're funding until now and into March. And this year we've had to ask them much earlier for that. So they've had to make some difficult decisions as well.
And I know I've asked this several times before, but we're continuing to communicate that to everybody who's impacted by this, that this is a new timeline. We're doing our best to work through it. And we're also continuing to work on our strategic plan and how we can make that next move towards really evaluating where we can best support kids with positions like these. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so from the time criticality perspective, I think this resolution is important. So I think we should go for that then, right? So then shall we, okay, for the voting then, or any
Sure,
more
yeah.
comments? Okay, Ellen, can you help us out, please?
Trustee Lou,
Aye.
trustee Cunningham. Aye. Trustee Vogel.
Aye.
Trustee Leong, absent. Trustee Madhatil,
Yeah, aye. Thank you. The resolution passed. Thank you very much. So let's go to the last session here. That's a closed session. And for that, is there any public comment before going for that?
no, there are not.
Okay. So I think then we will adjourn for the closed session.
Yes.
Okay, so we are back from the closed session. There's nothing to report. So the meeting is adjourned at 7:02. Thank you.